Picture this. Right now, as you watch this video, there are millions of people doing exactly what you're doing. They're scrolling, reading comments, watching content, absorbing every word. But here's what makes them different. They'll never leave a comment. They'll never hit that like button. They won't share their thoughts, won't add to the conversation, won't leave any trace that they were ever here. They're the silent majority of the internet, the invisible audience that outnumbers active participants by a staggering margin. And if you've ever hesitated before posting something, if you've ever typed out a comment only to delete it before hitting send, if you've ever wondered whether your voice even matters in the endless noise of social media, then you already understand something profound about the psychology of digital silence. Because staying quiet online isn't just about being shy or passive. It's a complex psychological phenomenon shaped by fear, strategy, self-protection, and sometimes surprising wisdom. The people who choose silence aren't absent from the conversation. They're just participating in a way that nobody sees. Insight 1: The invisible majority. There's a rule in internet culture that most people have never heard of, but it explains virtually everything about how online communities actually function. It's called the 99-1 principle, and it goes something like this. In any online community, 90% of users only consume content, never contributing anything themselves. 9% occasionally edit, comment, or engage in small ways. And just 1%, a tiny sliver of the user base, actively creates the vast majority of content that everyone else consumes. This isn't speculation or theory. Study after study has confirmed this pattern across virtually every platform imaginable. One of Wikipedia's founders discovered that over 50% of all edits on the site were made by less than 1% of users. Research examining digital health communities found that the top 1% of active users created nearly 74% of all posts, while the bottom 90% contributed less than 2%. Social media platforms, discussion forums, online support groups, they all follow this same lopsided distribution. The silent observers vastly outnumber the vocal participants. These silent users have a name in research literature. They're called lurkers, though that term carries unfortunate negative connotations that researchers have spent years trying to correct. Because for decades, lurking was viewed as problematic behavior, something that needed to be fixed or changed. Lurkers were labeled freeriders, social loafers, passive consumers who took value from communities without giving anything back. Platform designers obsessed over how to convert lurkers into posters, how to get them to engage, to participate, to contribute. The assumption was always that lurking represented a failure of some kind, either a failure of the platform to properly engage users or a failure of the users themselves to fully participate in the community experience. But here's what that perspective completely misses. Lurking isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature of how humans actually engage with information and community. Research has shown that lurkers engage in what's called legitimate peripheral participation, a concept that recognizes observation and learning as valid forms of involvement. Before people feel comfortable contributing to any community, they need to learn its norms, its culture, its unspoken rules and expectations. They need to understand what kind of content gets rewarded, what gets ignored, what gets punished. This learning happens through watching, through reading, through absorbing the patterns of interaction without jumping in. In traditional in-person communities, this process happened naturally. You'd attend a few meetings before speaking up. You'd observe the group dynamics before inserting yourself into them. Online, this same process looks like lurking. And it's not just newcomers who lurk. Studies have found that even the most active participants in online communities spend far more time reading and observing than they do posting or commenting. Everyone lurks to some degree because consuming information is actually the primary way that most people engage with digital spaces. The psychological profile of lurkers reveals something fascinating. They're not necessarily shy or socially anxious, though some are. They're not universally introverted or lacking in confidence. Many lurkers are thoughtful, deliberate people who simply calculate that the costs of posting outweigh the benefit. They recognize that every contribution leaves a permanent digital footprint, that every opinion invites judgment, that every post opens them up to potential criticism or misunderstanding. For them, silence isn't weakness or passivity. It's a strategic choice, a form of self-protection in an environment where the risks of speaking often exceed the rewards. When researchers have asked lurkers why they don't post, the answers reveal a complex web of motivations. Some say they don't feel they have anything valuable to add to the conversation. Others mention that they're still learning about the topic or community. Many cite concerns about privacy, not wanting to leave traces of their identity or opinions scattered across the internet. And a significant number mention fear of being judged, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear that their contribution won't be good enough or won't be received well. These aren't irrational concerns. They're grounded in the very real dynamics of how online spaces actually function. Insight 2: The architecture of fear. To understand why so many people stay silent online, you have to understand a psychological phenomenon that was first identified decades before the internet even existed. In the 1970s, a German political scientist named Elisabeth Noelle Neumann developed what she called the spiral of silence theory. She observed that people constantly scan their environment to assess which opinions seem to be gaining support and which seem to be losing ground. When individuals perceive that their view aligns with what they believe is the majority opinion, they feel comfortable expressing it. But when they sense that their view is in the minority, they tend to stay silent to avoid social isolation. This creates a spiral effect. As people with minority views stay silent, the majority opinion appears even more dominant, which makes others even less likely to speak up, which makes the majority opinion seem even more overwhelming, and the cycle continues. Over time, entire perspectives can effectively disappear from public discourse, not because people stopped holding them, but because the social cost of expressing them became too high. Noelle Neumann developed this theory by studying face-to-face interactions and traditional media environments. But when researchers started examining social media behavior, they discovered something both fascinating and troubling. The spiral of silence doesn't just persist in digital spaces, it actually intensifies. A major study conducted by the Pew Research Center examined how people engaged with controversial topics on social media, specifically focusing on discussions about government surveillance revelations. What they found was striking. People who believed their social media friends and followers disagreed with them were significantly less likely to share their views, both online and in face-to-face settings. Of the 14% of people who were unwilling to discuss the issue in person, only 0.3%, essentially no one, were willing to post about it on social media. The researchers concluded that social media did not provide an alternative forum for those with minority views to express themselves. If anything, it made them even more reluctant to speak. Why does social media amplify the spiral of silence rather than breaking it? Several factors converge to create an environment where self-censorship feels safer than expression. First, there's the visibility problem. When you share an opinion in a face-to-face conversation, your audience is limited to whoever happens to be present. But when you post something on social media, your potential audience is vast and largely unknown. You might think you're sharing with friends, but those friends can screenshot, share, and amplify your words to audiences you never intended to reach. This awareness of being potentially watched by an indeterminate crowd makes people cautious. Second, there's the permanence problem. Spoken words fade, but digital text endures. Something you post today can be discovered, referenced, and used against you months or years later. The internet doesn't forget, and people know this. They've seen careers destroyed over old tweets, relationships ruined by resurfaced comments, reputations shattered by out-of-context screenshot. Every post becomes a potential liability, something that could come back to haunt you in ways you can't predict or control. Then there's what researchers call posting anxiety, a specific form of fear associated with sharing content online. Studies have developed questionnaires to measure this anxiety, finding that it stems from several interconnected psychological factors. Fear of negative evaluation sits at the core, the worry that others will judge you harshly, find your contribution stupid or boring or offensive. This fear gets amplified by what psychologists call hurt feeling proneness, the sensitivity to emotional pain that makes some people especially vulnerable to criticism or rejection. When you combine these factors with low interpersonal trust, the sense that others might use your words against you or interpret them uncharitably, you create a perfect storm of anxiety that keeps people silent. For individuals with these traits, the act of posting can trigger genuine physiological stress responses. Their hearts race, their palms sweat, they refresh their feeds obsessively to check whether anyone has responded and how. Young women in particular report intensely anxious experiences around posting, describing how they'll lie awake at night after sharing something, unable to stop checking for likes and comments, feeling their self-worth rise and fall with each notification or lack thereof. This isn't just about being sensitive or overly concerned with others' opinions. It's about navigating an environment that's genuinely hostile to vulnerability, where any misstep can become a public humiliation, where judgment is instant and often harsh, where the reward for speaking up rarely matches the risk. The algorithms that govern social media platforms make all of this worse. They amplify content that generates strong reactions, which means that extreme opinions, controversial takes, and inflammatory statements rise to visibility while moderate, thoughtful perspectives get buried. Users see this dynamic playing out constantly. They watch as nuanced comments get attacked from all sides, as people who try to find middle ground get accused of fence-sitting or cowardice, as anyone who expresses uncertainty or complexity gets drowned out by those who speak with absolute confidence. In this environment, silence starts to look not just safe, but rational. Why subject yourself to potential attack when you could just observe from a distance? Why risk being misunderstood when you could simply consume content without contributing to it? The psychology of digital silence is, in many ways, the psychology of reasonable self-preservation in an unreasonable environment. Insight 3: The Watchers in the Shadows. Here's what most people get wrong about lurkers. They assume that staying silent means not participating, that reading without commenting equals passive consumption with no real engagement. But research into what lurkers actually do tells a completely different story. Lurkers aren't just scrolling mindlessly past content. They're actively learning, carefully evaluating information, thoughtfully considering perspectives, and often gaining just as much value from online communities as people who post regularly. In some cases, they might even be gaining more. Studies of online support groups provide some of the clearest evidence for this. Researchers examined patients with chronic illnesses who participated in digital health communities, comparing those who posted regularly with those who only read others' posts. They measured empowerment, well-being, satisfaction with the community, and other psychological outcomes. What they found surprised many people. Lurkers benefited from the communities almost as much as active posters did. They felt more informed about their conditions, gained emotional support from reading others' experiences, felt less alone in their struggles, and reported improvements in their ability to manage their health. The only significant differences researchers found were that lurkers felt slightly less satisfied with the communities and reported lower levels of giving and receiving social support, which makes sense given that they weren't actively exchanging messages with others. But on the most important measures, the ones related to actual health outcomes and psychological well-being, lurkers were doing just fine. The researchers concluded that merely reading posts from others could be beneficial for patients, suggesting that physicians should encourage their patients to explore online support groups even if those patients never intend to post anything themselves. This pattern extends far beyond health communities. In online learning environments, students who lurk before posting report that they're discovering which messages to reply to, identifying role models to emulate, avoiding redundant contributions, and acquiring knowledge about topics before jumping into discussions. They're not passively absorbing information. They're actively strategizing about how to eventually participate more effectively. The lurking phase serves as a kind of apprenticeship, a period of observation that prepares people to contribute more meaningfully when they're ready. Some researchers have even argued that reading should be considered a form of participation in its own right, not a deficient version of posting but a legitimate and valuable way of engaging with online communities. What lurkers do varies considerably based on their motivations and the communities they inhabit. Some are what researchers call pure lurkers, who are primarily motivated by the fact that a particular community is the only place to find certain content. They're there for the information, not the social interaction, and posting would serve no purpose for them. Others are learning lurkers who are deliberately studying the community before contributing, absorbing its norms and culture so they can participate more effectively later. Many of these individuals eventually transition into active posters once they feel comfortable and knowledgeable enough. Then there are strategic lurkers who have calculated that the benefits of posting don't outweigh the costs for them personally. They value their privacy, want to avoid drama or conflict, or simply don't feel the need to broadcast their thoughts. Their silence isn't about fear or inadequacy. It's about making an informed choice about how they want to engage with digital spaces. Research has also identified what might be called protective lurkers, people who stay silent because of legitimate concerns about safety, harassment, or professional consequences. Women and minorities, in particular, often face disproportionate levels of online abuse and harassment when they post publicly. For these individuals, lurking isn't just a personal preference. It's a survival strategy in environments that can turn hostile quickly. The decision to stay silent reflects not personal limitation but rational assessment of a genuinely threatening landscape. Similarly, people in certain professions, teachers, healthcare workers, government employees, face professional restrictions on what they can say publicly. Their silence online doesn't indicate lack of opinions or engagement. It indicates awareness of the real-world consequences that can follow from digital expression. The watchers in the shadows, then, represent a much more diverse and active group than the term lurker suggests. They're learning, evaluating, protecting themselves, making strategic choices, and often benefiting from online spaces in ways that don't require them to leave any visible trace of their presence. The assumption that participation equals posting and silence equals absence fundamentally misunderstands how people actually engage with digital communities. Insight 4: The price of silence. But here's the complicated part. While lurking can be strategic, protective, and even beneficial in many ways, it also comes with costs that aren't always immediately obvious. The psychology of staying silent online isn't just about what you avoid by not posting. It's also about what you miss out on, what you sacrifice, and how the experience of perpetual observation without participation shapes your relationship with digital spaces and with yourself. One of the most pervasive experiences associated with lurking is what researchers call social media fatigue. This isn't the fatigue that comes from posting too much or engaging too actively. It's the exhaustion that comes from constant exposure to others' lives, opinions, and achievements without any outlet for your own expression. Studies have found that social media fatigue is actually positively associated with lurking behavior, creating a feedback loop where the more fatigued you feel, the more you withdraw into silence, but that withdrawal doesn't alleviate the fatigue. It might even make it worse. The act of lurking keeps you connected to the stream of content, keeps you comparing your life to others, keeps you exposed to the carefully curated highlight reels that dominate social media, but it denies you the opportunity to share your own story, to receive support or validation, to experience the reciprocity that can make social media feel meaningful rather than just draining. Then there's the phenomenon of FOMO, fear of missing out, which hits lurkers particularly hard. When you're constantly observing others' social activities, travel adventures, professional successes, and relationship milestones without sharing your own experiences, it creates a distorted sense of reality. You see everyone else living these full, exciting lives while your own life, which you don't post about, feels mundane by comparison. Research has established strong links between FOMO, excessive social media use, and anxiety disorders. The passive consumption of others' content, the very behavior that defines lurking, has been specifically associated with increases in anxiety, especially for individuals who already have low self-esteem. The lurkers who might benefit most from the connection and validation that posting could provide are often the ones most trapped in patterns of silent observation that reinforce their feelings of inadequacy. The comparison culture of social media becomes particularly toxic for people who only consume without creating. When you post, you at least have the opportunity to present your own narrative, to highlight your own achievements and experiences, to balance the scales somewhat. But when you only observe, you're constantly measuring yourself against others' best moments without offering any counterweight of your own. Young people especially report feeling judged and evaluated based on what they see online, even when they're not posting themselves. They internalize the standards they observe, the beauty ideals, the lifestyle expectations, the markers of success and popularity, and then measure themselves against these often impossible standards. Many describe a sense of being watched even when they're not actively participating, as if the mere act of being on a platform makes them subject to its evaluative gaze. This creates what some researchers call a coruscating anxiety, a constant state of low-level stress and self-consciousness that pervades the social media experience. There's also a paradox at the heart of digital silence. People often lurk to protect themselves from judgment and criticism, to avoid the vulnerability that comes with expressing opinions or sharing personal content. But lurking doesn't actually eliminate those feelings. In fact, it might intensify them. When you never post, you never get the opportunity to discover that most people aren't actually judging you as harshly as you fear they might. You never experience the relief of sharing something vulnerable and finding that people respond with support rather than criticism. You never build the resilience that comes from occasionally facing negative feedback and surviving it. Instead, the fear stays abstract and powerful, unchallenged by actual experience. The silence that feels like protection can become a prison, keeping you isolated from the very connections and validation that might actually reduce your anxiety. Research has also found that lurkers often report lower levels of empowerment compared to active participants. This makes psychological sense. When you contribute to a community, when you share knowledge or support or perspective, you feel useful and valuable. You experience yourself as someone with something to offer. But when you only consume, you can start to feel like a passive spectator in your own digital life, someone who doesn't matter, whose voice wouldn't make a difference anyway. This sense of powerlessness can extend beyond social media into other areas of life, reinforcing beliefs about your own irrelevance or inadequacy. The price of silence, then, isn't just about missing out on likes or followers or online validation. It's about the subtle ways that perpetual observation without participation can shape your sense of self, your relationship with others, and your experience of digital spaces as either empowering or diminishing. The watchers in the shadows might be making rational choices given the environments they navigate, but those choices still carry costs that accumulate over time in ways that aren't always visible or easy to measure. Insight 5: Finding your voice in the noise. So where does this leave us? If staying silent online can be both strategic and costly, both protective and limiting, how do we navigate the space between perpetual lurking and reckless oversharing? The answer isn't as simple as just telling people to post more or overcome their fears. It requires understanding that different people have different relationships with digital expression, that silence can be a valid choice, but also that finding ways to participate authentically can be genuinely valuable for those who want to but struggle with the fear. Research into why some lurkers eventually become posters reveals several key factors. One is the development of what psychologists call attitude certainty, confidence in your own opinions and perspective. When you feel genuinely certain about something, when you've thought it through carefully and arrived at a considered position, you're more likely to share it despite potential disagreement. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or closed-minded. It means developing enough self-trust that you can express views without needing everyone to agree with you. Another factor is social media integration, the degree to which social media is woven into your daily life and identity. People who see social media as a core part of how they connect with others and express themselves are more willing to post regularly. But here's the interesting part. For people with low attitude certainty who also have high social media integration, the platform can actually become liberating. As they use it more, they gradually become more vocal, eventually even exceeding the posting rates of people who started with high attitude certainty. This suggests that for some people, the path to finding their voice online involves gradual exposure and practice rather than waiting until they feel completely confident. The key seems to be shifting how you think about posting. Instead of viewing it as a performance that will be judged, what if you saw it as simply contributing to a conversation? Instead of imagining a vast audience scrutinizing your every word, what if you focused on the few people who might actually benefit from what you have to say? Research on social anxiety in online contexts suggests that people who tune into others rather than self-monitoring constantly tend to experience less anxiety. When you're focused on connecting, on sharing something useful or interesting or authentic, rather than on how you're being perceived, the act of posting becomes less fraught. This doesn't mean ignoring reasonable caution or posting recklessly. It means finding a middle path between paralyzing self-consciousness and thoughtless expression. Some practical strategies can help. Starting small matters. Post simple, low-stakes content before working up to more personal or controversial material. Share others' content before creating your own. Comment on friends' posts before making your own statements. This gradual approach builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, confidence in your ability to do something based on successfully doing it before. Each small positive experience creates a foundation for slightly bigger ones. It's also worth examining your expectations. If you're waiting for posts to go viral or expecting hundreds of likes, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and anxiety. Most content gets modest engagement, even from people with large followings. That's normal, not a reflection of your worth or the value of what you shared. Lowering your expectations doesn't mean lowering your standard. It means recognizing that the value of posting often lies more in the act of expression itself than in the metrics that follow. Authenticity matters more than perfection. Research consistently finds that people who try to present a carefully curated, idealized version of themselves online experience more anxiety and less satisfaction than those who share more genuine, imperfect content. The irony is that the polished content that people think will protect them from judgment often comes across as inauthentic or trying too hard, while vulnerable, real content tends to connect more deeply with others. This doesn't mean oversharing or using social media as therapy. It means being willing to present your actual thoughts, your real experiences, your honest reactions, rather than constantly performing a version of yourself you think others want to see. And here's something crucial. Lurking is a valid choice. Not everyone needs to be an active poster. Not everyone needs to broadcast their thoughts or share their lives publicly. If you've examined your relationship with social media, considered the costs and benefits, and decided that mostly observing serves you well, that's legitimate. The goal isn't to turn every lurker into a poster. It's to make sure that people who want to participate but are held back by fear have ways to overcome that fear. It's to ensure that silence is a choice rather than a cage. For those who do choose to stay mostly silent, the research suggests ways to make that choice healthier. Be mindful of comparison trap. Remember that what you see online represents heavily curated highlights, not full realities. Limit your time on platforms if you notice them increasing anxiety or feelings of inadequacy. Follow accounts that inspire or educate rather than those that trigger envy or self-criticism. Use social media as a tool for specific purposes, finding information, staying loosely connected, enjoying entertainment, rather than as a barometer of your own worth or a window into lives you should be envying. The hidden mindset of people who stay silent online, then, isn't one mindset but many. It's protective and anxious, strategic and fearful, wise and limiting, all at once. It reflects reasonable responses to unreasonable environments, but it also sometimes reflects internalized fears that don't match reality. The path forward isn't about forcing everyone into visibility or pathologizing silence. It's about creating space for people to participate in ways that feel authentic and sustainable for them, whether that means posting daily, commenting occasionally, or mostly just watching from the shadows. Your voice matters if you choose to use it, but your presence matters too, even if it's invisible. If you found yourself in this exploration, if you recognized your own complicated relationship with posting and silence, hit that like button and subscribe to Flashlight Mind for more deep dives into the hidden psychology of digital life. And maybe, just maybe, leave a comment. Not because you have to, but because you can.